I can.
All right. All right. All right. That's good. So I just want to, yeah. So intellectual property is divided into the different types. We have what we call patents, which are creations of the mind, which are industrially applicable. This means a patent is anything that can be employed in an industry, which could be, say, manufacturing, which could be the service industry. So if it does not have that capability for use in an industry, whether service or manufacturing or any other related industry, then we don't consider it a patent. Copyrights, the next one we'll talk about.
Good morning, everyone. I think we just lost Moses, but he's reconnecting. He's joining us in a few minutes, seconds. Just wait for like 1 minute. He's joining back. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry everyone. I got my connection got disconnected again, but I've tried to fix that. I apologize. So let's get on with the presentation. I was talking about copyrights. These are rights which accrue for creations in the field of literature, art, film, music, software, and I mentioned that this type of intellectual property ordinarily does not need to be registered. It when you reduce a copy, whatever you're writing into written form, i.e. either by typing or writing code, the same becomes yours, you own it. Registration is only for the purpose of getting evidence of a certificate as proof in case of any contention. Then we have trademarks and service marks. A trademark is it's a logo, it's a sign, or it's a representation which differentiates goods or services of one business from the goods and services of another. So, like I mentioned, the trademark could either be, when we say trademark, we refer to goods. These are signs, words, signs, smells, colors, and shapes that are used to distinguish goods of one business from the goods of another. But when we talk about service marks, service marks refer to they refer to words, symbols, smells, sounds, colors, and shapes that are used to distinguish one service from another. So when you talk about goods, you could say Mukwano versus Bidco. That's a good, like a bottle of oil. But then service mark would be, say, Serena versus Protea. So that's the that's the difference between trademarks and service marks. But the process of registration is very, very similar. And when we talk of trademarks, you have to show that it's a very, very distinct mark. It's not been used previously. Yeah, that's when you get the registration. But you must note that it's possible to get registration for okay, like for example, say use the word Serena, not for hotel. So if the trademark Serena or service mark Serena is being used, it's being used, say, for a hotel, it's possible to get the same for, say, attire, although someone's already using it for a hotel. So basically, if the goods are not in the same class, i.e., all the services are not in the same class, so you can use the word Serena for a new vehicle, whereas we already have the name Serena for a hotel as a name of a hotel. So thought I should highlight that. In terms of just give me a moment. I'd like to stop some interference. There's a sound. There's a sound outside here. I'd like to stop. It's interfering with my presentation. Someone's making a lot of noise. Let me just get it stopped. Sorry. Sorry everyone, I'm back. The sound was quite distracting. There was a lot of sound outside, and I just had to get the the people working outside to reduce the noise. Sorry about that. Yeah, it was affecting my presentation. The other type of intellectual property we need to look at is what we refer to as designs. Designs, this refers to protection specific to the appearance of objects in a business, such as the shape of a bottle. Look at Fanta, the Fanta bottle, it's unique, yeah? It's got that whole, that beautiful shape. Businesses seek to protect things such as designs, the shape of a bottle, the shape of a building, an architectural design, because sometimes it's a design that makes the product appealing to say, you know, a business's customers. So that's why it becomes important to protect you know, designs. So that kind of protection is also offered even under Ugandan law. The other thing that we need to consider, type of intellectual property, is what we call geographical indicators. Geographical indicators are they're basically they basically kind of like say words that show the origin of a product. So, for example, if you called your product Kampala, and that became its, you know, trademark, that would be referred to as a geographical indicator. The best example is champagne. Champagne is a sparkling wine, which comes from the Champagne region of France. So when you say champagne, you're making reference to a wine that originates from France. So I don't know, you reflect and see if you can come up with a few other examples of geographical indicators, but that's one that I would share. So it's possible to protect a name or word showing the origin of you know, of the product. For example, the word Java, you know, for coffee. Java is an island in Indonesia. But when you say Java, of course, it's become associated with coffee, but we know that it's definitely an island. There's also a strait called the Java Strait. So that would show that essentially that's where the product comes from. The other type of intellectual property that we need to consider is what we call trade secrets. Trade secrets are basically information that you know, gives a business's products competitive advantage, products or services. So for example, the ingredients in the KFC chicken or the makeup of Coca-Cola and Pepsi, we do not know up to now, but we don't know what is mixed to come up with those. So those are also protected. You can get protection for those under the law. Then we have a new format of intellectual property called layout designs. Layout designs refers to protection accorded to semiconductor integrated circuits or microchips. So this is like in for computer hardware. This protection is accorded to those microchips that are developed by you know, hardware specialists. Yeah, I won't dwell so much on that. We go on to the next thing. The question then becomes, what are the benefits of IP for a business? Yeah, what are the benefits of intellectual property? One, this is what I think. One, intellectual property prevents other people from copying one's products and services. Secondly, the use of IP, such as trademarks, designs, and others, can be used in building a strong brand, image, or identity. Yeah. So how do you do that? Yes. Now everyone knows, for example, Total or Shell. I mean, those are like brand household names now. Blue Band in Uganda. So we know, we actually have forgotten that Blue Band belongs to Unilever. We think it's a company. So that's how you can actually use intellectual property to strengthen your brand, to get known within the market, and to even become a multinational, to break out. Very, very important. You can use intellectual property for that. And the next thing is the existence of a right to such intellectual property bases. So since the government collects or registers, the government or intergovernmental organizations like the World Intellectual Property Organization, the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization that's based in Harare, register these intellectual property. It's possible to, by doing a search, you're able to quickly learn as an entrepreneur. If you want to validate or have a proof of concept, you can quickly check the databases to see whether your idea has already been implemented. So it's a good way to do market research by running through those databases, and gives you a clue of how you're doing, or it can help you with your research and development of your product or service. So that's a good thing. Also, intellectual property rights can be licensed, they can be franchised, they can be assigned, they can be utilized in different transactions, meaning that you can actually make money by protecting your intellectual property. When you protect it, then whoever needs to use the same needs to get a license from you, and then they have to pay you license fees or royalties, and that's a good way of generating income for your business. The other thing is intellectual property, is also recognized as an asset, so it can actually increase the valuation of your business, especially now for us that are planning, to pitch to investors end of this month. It's important to be able to identify different intellectual property rights that your business owns, because that adds or actually will help with your bargaining, because you can point to them as assets, which increases the valuation of your business. So the value of your business goes up because of the intellectual property that you own. And sometimes it is that the intellectual property is the core of your business. Sometimes, look at Airbnb or Uber, the technology, that is the technology that allows for people to call cars or to hire these buildings. The software is what is actually most valuable. And so we have more and more, we have businesses that are less of brick and mortar, but are more founded more around intellectual property. So having technology that changes. So a lot of unicorns are currently in fintech, in in other spaces, in other industries, are built around intellectual property, the protection of intellectual property. So yeah, the likes of Facebook, Google, etc. The other thing that intellectual property can do for your business is that it can augment business strategy. For example, you can register trademarks even if you don't intend to use the same for your business. You can just use them to lock out your competitors. There's nothing illegal about that. You can go, register so that your competitors are locked out from using the same. So it's also a good way, and there's nothing illegal about that. Yeah, so I think next thing that I would like to talk about is, so now that we've learned about why it's important to to protect your intellectual property, I would like us to consider the steps that we would take in deciding whether to register the intellectual property or not. So these are the considerations. Personally, I'd be thinking, do you need a brand to commercialize your product or services? If you need, then you want to register an intellectual property. In this case, it could either be a trademark or a service mark. The next question would be, do you produce content that requires protection? So if you're a writer, you think to yourself, is the content I'm developing safe? Can it be copied? Will I lose out economically in case this content were not protected? So that's important. So even for a business in manufacturing, you come up with a patent, something, a new design for something, a new product, a new machine that does work faster. Ask yourself, if this were to get into the wrong hands, would I be safe? So you need to consider that. Then the next thing is, you have confidential information you or your employees need to protect. So think about whether there's confidential information you may need to protect. If so, you could register that as trade secret. So if your business is built around keeping some of your ingredients, say you're like a chef or a manufacturer, keeping some of your ingredients secret, then you may want to consider registering intellectual property. The other thing is, do you have a new technology design you'd like to secure ownership of? So have you, done a lot of work around research and development and have come up with something, and if you didn't protect it, all your effort and sweat would be wasted. So very, very important to consider that. The other thing is, you also want to see what's your business model. I know last week you did business model development, but ask yourself, what's your business model? Are you, are you planning to license, or are you going to employ the franchise model? If that's the case, then for people, thinking that way, if you're looking at distributorship, franchise model, then very, very important to have intellectual property, because, as you know, a franchise model is built around, an initial owner who gives rights to another person to use their intellectual property. So you cannot have a franchise model without intellectual property. So it's very, very important to consider that. Onwards, I'll give you a moment to ask questions in a bit. The other thing that I'll be looking at in deciding whether to register an intellectual property right or not is, I will assess the intellectual property and see if it's vulnerable to infringement. So I ask myself, can this be easily copied? Can it be stolen? If it can, then definitely I want it to be registered. The next thing I'll be looking at is, I'll be focusing on strengthening my internal IP protection. So you must note that even before you go to register your intellectual property, there are other avenues available to you that you can use to safeguard your intellectual property, especially during the stage of development. We have contracts called non-disclosure agreements, which you can have all your employees sign. So your employees can sign those, your partners, the people that you partner with, your customers, if the technology is revealed to them, it will be important for each of these people to sign that agreement, saying that they will not disclose or divulge information related to your intellectual property. So it'd be nice to set up systems internally before you even spend money outside. Set up those systems, have the contracts, non-disclosure agreements. Also, you can also ensure that if it's possible, if it's a type of intellectual property that you can keep in a safe place, maybe have it in a safe. If you're an author, for example, the manuscript of your book should be kept in a safe. You don't just leave it on your table. So you can take some of those steps before you look outwards to, sitting down with a lawyer and discussing the options available to you for registration. The other thing that I would consider is you must note that intellectual property law is specific to a geographical location. So the law, yes, we have international standards, which we're going to talk about very soon. We have regional standards. So we have international standards that are developed by the UN and the UN, the World Trade Organization, which is part of the UN, has developed regulations on protection of intellectual property. But at the same time, we also have Africa level laws protecting intellectual property. But also locally, we have laws in Uganda, like the Industrial Property Act, which is the one that governs the protection of intellectual property, the Trademarks Act, and the Copyright Act. Those are the three laws that that govern, and the regulations under those laws. But you need to know that if your strategy is to expand out of Uganda, if you want to, do business out of Uganda, you will want to consider the laws of each country that your business is going to be operating in. So, look at the trademark law, copyrights law, intellectual property law in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda. So very, very important to consider that. I'll be talking about that a little later. I'll be going through what you can do to register within the African continent. The other thing that I'll be doing is to, before I register my intellectual property, I'd be looking to be prepared to enforce my intellectual property rights. So when you register, you should know that people can still infringe your intellectual property. So you may register, have your certificate, have evidence that you're the owner, but people still go ahead and infringe upon your intellectual property. So what do you do? So you must plan for, to set aside resources, to hire lawyers, to hire experts to advise, and if need be, enforce your rights before a court of law. So registration is only half the journey. The full journey is being able to protect and having the resources to actually utilize the certificate, the registration certificate, as evidence of your ownership, and bring perpetrators, those that are infringing, before courts of law to enforce your rights. Then the other thing that I would like to consider is it may also be important to join forces where possible. It could be possible to register intellectual property as a group, where it's possible. Try and register it as a group because it brings down your costs. Yeah, you see? So instead of registering it as an individual, you could maybe register it, under your company, so that the other shareholders can also offset the costs of registration, because intellectual property protection is not cheap. It comes at a cost. So having said that, before I go any further, do we have any questions? You can ask questions, feel free. Would like to make this as interactive as possible. So just feel free to ask a few questions if you have questions at this juncture. All right, no questions as yet? Okay, if that's so, we'll look at the next thing, which is, okay, so now that you have your intellectual property registered, what do you do about it? It'd be nice to commercialize it if that's your business model. How do you commercialize it? You can either license it, that is, you draw up a contract with whoever needs to use your intellectual property, and that contract sets out the terms and conditions of use, which include the payment terms. This payment could be annual, so the license can be an annual license, and that allows your business to continue earning from your product or your development. So very, very important to ensure that to license, you have a contract in place. Or if you're franchising, you also have a contract in place. Yes, Emma, you're asking, you said copyrights should not be registered. What if someone duplicates my book? Well, I did not say that they should not be registered. I just say that legally they need not be registered for you to enforce your rights, so long as you can prove that you're the author. Yeah, but it's wise to register them just so as you can have a certificate, which is complete, conclusive proof that you're the owner. But legally speaking, once you write down whatever the book, once you write down the paragraphs or whatever, or the sentences in the book, you get copyrights to the book. So it's just your duty to show that you're the author. It's in your handwriting, or you used your laptop. So why we recommend that that you register is so that you don't have to go through that challenge of having to prove before the court. But it is a unique type of intellectual property in the sense that you don't actually need to register it to own it. So that's the status of the law. Now, I'm still talking about commercializing your IP. So I said have contracts to ensure that whoever is using IP is held accountable. They pay. They use your IP in the right manner as how you want them to use it. So that's very, very, very important. Yeah. So if you're thinking to license your intellectual property, all these things that they should be contracts. Then the next thing is the other way to you commercialize your intellectual property is actually to own it as a company, own it yourself, and then use it yourself. You don't need to, license it. So the likes of, Facebook, Airbnb are using their licenses. So some companies build their business model around licensing. Take an example of pharmaceutical companies. Those in Europe and say the US usually license other pharmaceutical companies, say in India, China, to produce. But when that is done, what happens is that the Indian and Chinese, pharmaceutical companies then pay licensing fees to the European and the US companies. That's one way of increasing one's revenue, So beyond just selling your own product, you can also license. That is referred to as technology transfer. And I think many of us may have come across this, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic period, because there's been conversation around transferring, technology from, say, the European nations, the US, to African nations to allow them to produce their own COVID-19 vaccines. But like I've said, you can also choose to utilize your own IP and use it for your business and still make money. So the next thing I'd like us to consider, if there are no questions around that, I'd like us to talk quickly about the registration procedures, costs, and duration for the different intellectual property rights. So we've talked about copyrights, we talked about trademarks, we talked about patents, we've talked about trade secrets, we talked about layout designs. I'm going to focus on patents, trademarks, and copyrights because they're the most common. You must note that this training can be fully exhaustive because we need like a whole day's training to go in depth. But I'm just going to give you an overview of what it looks like to register these intellectual property rights. Now, I mentioned earlier that registration can be done internationally or within the continent, within the African continent, or within African nations. So locally, within nations, like within Uganda. So international registration is done with the World Intellectual Property Organization that is based in Europe. I think it's based in Switzerland, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So you do your registration there. When you do a registration, say for example, copyrights or patents or trademark registration, the advantage of doing each at the international level, and here now we're talking about costs and procedure, because I mentioned to you that intellectual property costs are not cheap. Local registration may be cheap, but if you're looking at, because like I told you, each country has its own rules. So if you wanted to register your trademark, you'd have to register in Uganda, then register in the other 52 African countries. And that can be really, really, really costly. So governments have come up with a system where they're trying to centralize the registration process. And one of those is with the World Intellectual Property Organization. So when you register in Switzerland, what happens is some of the steps that you're required to follow are waived, meaning that, for example, for patents, if the patent is examined in Europe, examination means that they want to see whether your product is either novel, it's industrially applicable, it does not exist, has not been used somewhere else in the world, or been created somewhere else in the world, because that's the standard for patents. It's what we call there's no prior art, meaning that it's not been created before within the last 12 months. Secondly, it's not been like it's novel in that sense. Then it's also industrially applicable. So that's the standard that is used. So there are scientists, there's a group of scientists that do the examination of these patents. So for example, if examination of the patent is done in Europe, then when you come to the different countries, when you come to register in the different countries, you find that you don't have to go through examination again. You just have to go through a simpler process, and that makes it cheaper for you. So instead of doing examinations in each country, so if you wanted to do to operate, say, in 80 countries, you'd have to register in like 80 countries. That would be so expensive. So that's why I would advise entrepreneurs to register the World Intellectual Property Organization. Then also, there's a similar organization in Africa. In case you want to limit your operations to Africa, the Africa Intellectual Property Regional Intellectual Property Organization, which is based in Harare, does registration. So now they're about, I think they're about less than 16 members of the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization. So there are 53 African countries, 16 members, I think below 16 members of the ARIPO, we call it the ARIPO protocol, meaning that registration in Harare would only cover 16 countries. It's not as wide as the registration at the World Intellectual Property Organization. So the good news is that Uganda is part of the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization. They signed the protocol, meaning that if you register there, you can enjoy the easy process of registration in 15 other countries, give or take. So that's really it in terms of registration. So to reiterate, it's international, regional, and national. Yeah. Then we must talk about the duration of patents, trademarks, copyrights. How long do they last when you register? So if you register now, for how long do you enjoy this intellectual property? For patents, it's 20 years. After 20 years, you must renew the patent. So if you register now, you would have to register again in 2042. Yeah. And then trademarks last for 10 years. After 10 years, you need to renew the trademark. So it's not forever, it's not perpetual. The next thing is copyrights. Copyrights last for the lifetime of the author and 50 years after the death of the author. So if you live to 100 years and you created the copyright when you were 50, so it will be the 50 years you lived plus 50 years after you die. So you'd enjoy those copyrights until then. Otherwise, after that, the copyrights expire. For more information on that, you can go to the Uganda Registration Services Bureau website. They have useful information on registering the different trademarks, how long they last, the procedure, the actual procedure, like the steps. I didn't think we should get into that today, the actual steps of registration. But in terms of costs, this is what it looks like for patents in Uganda. If you're a foreigner, you pay $100 as an application fee. The examination fee is $250. The certificate is $100. That's for foreigners. For locals, the application fee for patent registration is $100,000. The examination fee is $150. The certificate is $90,000. So we also have what we call utility models. These are types of, it's not a type of patent, but in a situation where you're unable to register a patent because maybe the product or the technology you've come up with is not, it's not unique. It has new components, but not fully unique or novel. You can get what they call a utility model. So utility model is an inferior right. It's like if you can't get an absolute patent, you can get what they call a utility model. So as you can see, the fees are not so high, but what makes intellectual property rights protection expensive is that you have to register in each country. So imagine multiplying these fees times, say, 50 countries, then you can see it becomes costly for your business. The next thing we're looking at is the costs of registering a trademark. Trademark registration. So usually for a local applicant, that is a local company, these are the fees. Search fees, 25,000, application fees, 50,000, publication, 100,000, registration fees, 100,000. So the total is about 275,000 shillings. Then foreign applicants, $65 for such fees, application fees, $150, publication in the journal is $80, registration fees is $250, and the total is $545. Yeah. So that's what we have. That's for trademarks. And when you look at copyrights, the application fee is 50,000. Then you have to gazette it. There's a gazette fee as well, which is 300,000. So yeah, on average, 350,000 can get you, a copyright registration. So yep, that's it in terms of intellectual property. At this juncture, I will take a few questions. If you have questions on intellectual property, let's discuss it before we take our break. And then next we shall look at how to raise capital and finance for your business. The options available to you to do that. Thank you so much. Kindly ask questions. You can either, raise your hand and ask a question, or you can, send a question on chat. Feel free. Thank you. Are we together? Hello? Are we together? All right. There we go. Oh, yes. Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions? Is there anything that you'd like to know about intellectual property? So are all these registrations done by UNBS? No. These are done by URSB, Uganda Registration Services Bureau. The UNBS, stands for the Uganda National Bureau of Standards. So the Bureau of Standards certifies basically shows that it's the product is of quality, good quality, whereas URSB registers intellectual property rights and among other things. Okay, thank you, Rona. I'm here for questions. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, please feel free. This is something, intellectual property is a very important aspect of your business. It's very, very important for you to protect, to make sure that you have it, you actually, have it considered as you build your business. Yeah. So if there are no more questions, we'll take a mini break. Yeah. Let's take a mini break and then come back, and we're going to look at finance options for your business. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break, bathroom break, in case you need to go to the bathroom or make a phone call or something. We'll get back in 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. All right, welcome back from the break. Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the break. Would like to continue with our discussion. If there are no questions on intellectual property, or if you prefer to ask at the end, that's okay. We will now talk about finance. There is nothing that is key to a business more than finance. That is capital. The capital, or they say cash is king. Cash is king for your business. Very, very important. I think all of us know that. And it's important to have it in the right amounts, in the the right time, and yeah, because it helps us achieve a lot of things, to expand our businesses, to start our businesses, so it's a very, very important thing to talk about. And so when we think of capital, startup capital, so it depends on where you are on the growth curve. Are you at entry? Are you trying to expand? So when you're thinking of financing, you have to think and know your position, your growth position. Where are you as a business? Are you 5 years old? Are you 2 years old? Or if you're 1 year old, what are your revenue needs? So it's not really about the number of years, but it's really down to what your needs are. So you need to make an assessment. So the first thing I'd do when I think of finances as a business, I would first consider my capital needs, i.e., I'd consider my capital expenditures. That is, do I need money to buy tangible assets like property, like equipment for my business? What kind of money do I need? Or am I okay on that front, or do I need money for that? Next thing that you're looking at is look at your working capital. Do you actually have operating capital, money to like run operations, paying salaries, development, advertising, marketing, sales, all the like? So you consider your needs on that front as well. Then it's also important to set aside some money, contingency funds. That is money that may not be needed immediately, but in case of anything, COVID-19 has taught us that we need to be very good with crisis and emergency management. So we need to put in place crisis and management policies for our businesses. So in doing that, you need to set aside funds for situations such as the COVID-19 pandemic, because this helps cushion you, as you operate, as you continue providing services and developing your products. So so that's the first thing I'll do, is to make an assessment of your needs and say, okay, what do I need? And when you know what you need, then that determines the kind of finance you should look to get. So there are times when it's okay to get partners, that is equity financing. And there are times when it's more important or relevant to actually go to a bank and ask for a loan, rather than bring in equity partners. So we're going to discuss all of that. We're going to go through all of it, and just to understand what options are available to us. So in terms of financing, ordinarily what's going to happen is you're going to be looking at either types of finance, equity or debt financing, or mixed equity and debt financing. So essentially, when we say equity financing, we are saying that, remember yesterday we talked about companies. We are saying that you're going to get money from someone in exchange for, say, shares in your company. That's what is called equity financing. So what equity financing does is that you notice you get money, but you also lose control of your business. So in a way, it dilutes ownership of a business. You understand? Dilutes ownership. And So you need to properly think or soberly think through that option before you exercise it. So equity financing, we'll go through the different options that exist. So, but broadly speaking, that's what it is. Debt financing is where you go to an entity or an individual and ask for money. But you don't give out your shares, your company shares. You don't give those in exchange. What happens is that you'll be required to pay that money at an interest, with an interest. So the person may say, okay, you borrowed $1 million shillings, but in 2 months, I would expect to receive 1.4 million because this is the interest rate I'm giving you. So it's basically getting money, an advance of money, and then repaying it later with, with a bit of interest. So yeah, in terms of, let's look at equity sources of financing. So in terms of sources, the first one that usually people look at is you consider whether you have personal savings. So these personal savings would help you set up your company, would help you register, would help you get, obviously register and have shares in that company. So essentially, personal savings are actually a form of equity financing. Next one is you may, if you don't have that money or you don't have enough of it, you could consider speaking to friends and family and say, you know what, hey, please help me with this money. In exchange, I'll give you shares in my company. So you could look at friends and family. I think that's self-explanatory, yeah. Next thing is you could consider approaching private investors and venture capitalists. So private investors are people that have a lot of money. We call them high net worth individuals. So these are people that have quite a bit of money on their, accounts, and they would like to invest it. So these people are willing to invest in lucrative businesses. So if you have an idea that you believe and can prove is lucrative, then it'll be easy for you to get financing for your business. Some of you have watched shows like Shark Tank, where you see people appearing before, investors, private investors to get some money. The other type of, within that, you have what we call venture capital. Venture capital, this is now, you have institutions that have been set up for the purpose of investing in businesses. So if you hear of venture capital firms, that's what they do. They are managed by experts, the expert investment advisors. They collect money to invest. They do this on behalf of different people, individuals that are wealthy and don't have the time to manage their resources. Maybe pension firms, insurance companies, may put extra monies. Even governments can put monies into those funds. So you can approach those, and I think that's the gist of this month's trainings. It's around preparing you to approach private investors and venture capitalists, just to see, to enable you to access that funding. The other type of equity financing you can access is to get partners. So get more partners into your business. So if you have a great idea, maybe do not have the resources, and you have, someone who wants to do the same business, but actually has the resources, then you can partner with them. So partnerships may could be joint ventures, could be setting up a company together, could be setting up a partnership, signing a partnership agreement, and set up a partnership. Yesterday we talked about the different types of business entities one can actually set up. So it's that's an available avenue. You can exercise that. The other one is, I'm going to skip over and look at private placements. Private placements is where as a business in Uganda, for example, you're allowed to have as a company, allowed to have between 1 and 100 shareholders. So sometimes, if you don't have the resources, you can go out to the public. Please note, this is not an IP or what we call an initial public offer. It's distinct. It's where you go out to the public and say, can we get more shareholders? In this sense, it's similar to, say, having a partner, Yeah. So it's similar. It's like having a partner, But here now you get shareholders and these collect money from them and then use the same for expansion or for research and development, whichever. But that's an avenue available to you. The other one is what we refer to as an initial public offer. Many of you are probably following the IPO by MTN Uganda. MTN Uganda has basically it's issued an IPO. Now, an IPO is when a private company, seeks investment from members of the public. So people are asked to invest in the company. This means that the company is converting from being a private company into a public company. Now, a public company in Uganda is one that has between, in excess of 100 members. So any company with in excess of 100 members becomes a public company and is required to list with the Uganda Securities Exchange. And at the same time, it's also required to report, make some filings with the Capital Markets Authority. The Capital Markets Authority is the authority in Uganda which manages the affairs of public companies, but also investment into companies in Uganda. So it really basically looks at the issue of capital, the movement of capital between the public and different businesses in different businesses in Uganda. So basically, I'm trying to keep it basic, to define it, but that's how it looks. And so that's what an IPO is. I see here. So those are the types of or forms of equity financing that are available to you here in Uganda. I see here someone is asking, that's Emmanuel is asking, how do you pay venture capital? Yeah. Now, venture capital is first. We're going to come to that. Let's actually just continue with our presentation, because I do answer that question somewhere down in my presentation. So if you will be kind enough to hold on a moment, Emmanuel, I will be happy to answer that. Then Godfrey is asking, how's private investor different from a private placement? So a private investor, the difference, Godfrey, is that a private investor can either come in as a partner or can come through a private placement. Private placements allow private investors to join your company. You understand? But you should note that a private investor can also be a partner. You understand? So essentially, to be honest, when you do a private placement, people become shareholders in your company. You could refer to them as partners in that regard, but that's maybe technically speaking. But for in my view, the definition of a partner would be someone that is interested in carrying on, say, the day-to-day running of the business, is fully invested. It's not only just for investment purposes. So it is true, Godfrey, that a private investor could come in through the window or the door of a private placement, but also can come in as a partner. You understand? So that's the distinction. It's a very thin line. It's not very, the two are not so distinct. But yeah, I hope I have made sense in explaining, or with my explanation, sorry. There you go. Let's first roll on. Emmanuel, I'll answer your question along the way. So let's look at sources of debt financing. I've already defined debt financing as it's a situation where you get money as a loan, not as equity. So you don't exchange shares for the money. You get as a loan and pay interest. And so the different types of loan financing. Anti-clockwise, we see banks. The bank is the financial institutions. You go to them and they can lend you money. Yeah. For expansion, for whatever. We shall look at the criteria the banks use in a short while. We're going to talk about that. So you can go to a bank, you can go to a microfinance institution, like Pride Microfinance, banks like Stanbic, Centenary, Equity Bank. You could go to money lenders. The people called money lenders. These are individuals or companies that have been given licenses and allowed to lend money to businesses. So you can go to these, the investment clubs. So under the capital markets laws, we have companies that are set up for investment purposes. These companies can invest in your business as well. So if you go to them, individuals set up this company and use it as an investment vehicle. So you can approach them. If they have funding for you, they can actually fund your business. The other type of entity that you could borrow from is a savings and credit cooperative. I think many of us are familiar with SACCOs. They work really well in rural areas where people gather money. You gather money, monthly you put, each person makes a contribution, and then this money is revolves, the distribution of this money revolves around the members. So you could join a SACCO and wait for your turn, and then the money comes to you, you get a chunk of money and use it and pay it back. Or they also have the ability to lend. I think SACCOs, but they only lend to members. So you need to be, sign up, be a member, and then you lend. The same goes for cooperatives. Yesterday I talked about cooperatives. Cooperatives are entities that are set up to, enable a group of people with common interests, say farmers, to market their produce, also access capital. So meaning that they come together and they can lend to each other. And that's also a good form of financing. Trade credit, you can get these. These are financial products that are available, especially allowing you to do like international trade. You want to purchase, some, products, say from Japan. You can get someone, give you that money, and then you bring in your goods, sell them, and then pay back with an interest. So that's a form of it's a financing option. So it's good, especially if you already have an established customer base. You already know that your the good or the product is marketable. So you're going to go to Japan, bring in these cars. In 2 weeks they are sold. Then you give back the money with interest. So that's a type of financing that's available as a debt finance. So those are the types. Now we're going to look at them. I'm going to pick a few and look at them in depth, and that should help answer Emmanuel's question. I'd like us to look at venture capital as a type of equity finance, because why I've chosen this one is because I know at the end of the month, some of you are pitching before investors. So I'd like you to understand how this works. Now, a venture capitalist, like I've mentioned, it's usually an institutional investor, meaning that it's a company that does investments as a business. Their job is to identify good businesses, see their potential, put in money, and then what? And then, reap a benefit from that. So usually what these companies are looking at in terms of criteria to invest in a business, I'm sure Roy and his team will be able to share these with time. It'll be possible for them to, go through the details of this, but I'll give you an overview from a legal perspective. So usually what happens is the VC firm, we call them in short VCs, would want to get a tenfold return on their investment. So all note that, Emmanuel, now this answers your question. Note that when these people put money in your company, they are interested in you succeeding and then, growing this business and their shares increasing in value. You understand? Yeah. So like I mentioned yesterday, a share is like property that can be transferred, it can be held onto, and also it's property that entitles the holder to dividends in the company. So if your company grows, if this venture capital firm invests in your business and it grows, expands, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Zambia, wherever, you grow, and then the value of the shares grows, and that means the VC firm can choose to either hold onto the shares and continue collecting dividends, but most times what they prefer to do, they prefer to exit. There's a process called exiting. They, at some point, once they've seen that you've grown and the value of their shares has grown, then they exit the business, sell off their shares to another investor, and earn more. So they could inject, say, $100,000 in your business. Then in 5 years, your business grows and it's like 10,000, $10 million. So it means that the value of the VC's farm shares has grown and they're able to sell them off, say, at maybe $3 million. That means within 5 years, they've been able to make a profit of $2 million. So that's how their business, that's how it works, Emmanuel. So that's, you are asking me, how do you pay them back? You don't pay them back. It's what they call equity financing. It's not debt financing. It's just that they grow. They stand with you and ensure that your business grows, and then they reap by selling off their shares. They can sell them back to you or to another party. So, but usually they're interested in ensuring that they're able to get at least 10 times more than they've invested within 5 to 7 years. Then that's for businesses that are, startups. Then if you're in, say, in the growth stage, they're expecting to get 5 to 7 times their return on investment within the same period, within 5 to 7 years. If you're already, they usually are interested in businesses that already have, a large market potential, which are already growing at 20% per year, which therefore means that venture capitalists do not ordinarily fund businesses that are just, that need startup capital. They need you to have, been operating and to show that you're actually growing. You're actually growing, and you need this money for expansion. So usually they will give you this money for expansion or developing new products that will allow you to grow and scale. You understand? So they're really, really interested in that stage of growth. So yeah, so you need to, like I mentioned earlier, you need to assess your business and say, okay, who do I approach? Do I approach a venture capitalist, or do I approach an angel investor, or my family, or do I rely on my savings, or do I go to a bank? So very, very important. So just note that these people are interested in a business with already large market potential. So at least it must have been doing business. And that's not to say, that's not to discourage you though. I'm not discouraging, I'm just being realistic. This is the, that's what happens in the market. Then the other thing that you'll be looking at, we should look at is private investors. What do they normally look at? These private investors are usually, are interested in businesses they understand. So you'll find that, if someone is an expert in the food industry or agribusiness, they would want to invest in companies that do, in agribusiness or the food industry. So you find that there are special funds. So if you read up online or newspapers, you're going to see that there are special funds for different industries. So you can find, for example, there's the yield fund, which I know is for mostly businesses in doing agribusiness, in agriculture. So it's up to you to look at, when you're looking out for this capital, look out for an investor. If you want money from a private investor, look out for one who's interested in your industry, because then it becomes easier to get money from them than if you went, say you're doing, your fintech, but now you go to an agricultural fund. That wouldn't work. So investors also like to work with, they like to invest as a group. So it would also be nice because that obviously brings down the risk on their behalf. So because reinvesting new is a risk. So you find if it's possible to identify different types of investors, try and bring them together so that you can assure them that the risk is being shared. Then that also increases your chances of getting an investment. But also these investors are interested in getting 10 times their investment at the end of 5 years. So at the end of the day, in the words of Dr. Trademarks, he says, if you're pitching to an investor and you mention that, I'm paraphrasing, and you mention that you're not sure whether you're going to make a profit, then you should not be appearing before that investor, because investors are interested in getting a return on investment. And also private investors are looking at 10 times what they have invested at the end of 5 years. So you should be able to prove that. Then the other thing is, I mentioned yesterday we talked about corporate governance. We talked about why it's important to have a good management team, that is board of directors, have different meetings, document, have policies in place. Is because private investors are looking at ensuring that they look at your business and see whether it has a strong management team, because it is the management which will grow the business. If the business does not grow, it means their investment is wasted. So yeah, that's very, very, very important to note when dealing with private investors. Now, banks, when you're dealing with banks, now this is debt financing. What are banks looking at? So you go before a bank. Commercial lenders like banks rely on the following criteria. Generally speaking, this is not exhaustive, but generally speaking, they look at your character. So they will do a search and say, hey, how's this one's character? Have they been paying back other banks who have lent them or other financiers? So we have what we call a credit reference bureau. It's a department that that's set up under the law to list or grade debtors, So basically it allows, if you fail to pay a loan, your name goes there, showing that you've not paid that loan. And so it makes it harder for you to access capital. So they have a grading system that is A, triple A, B, C. So I think A is like, shows that you're very good at paying back your credit. And B gets worse, C. So they rank you. So you, as much as possible as a business, you have to make sure, and that information is shared by law, it's shared by the different banks and also other funding institutions like microfinance institutions. They can access your information. And that's why when you go to a bank to borrow, they ask you to, there's a card that you're given. Yeah, that's the card that is used by the Credit Reference Bureau. So that card is evidence of your indebtedness or the fact that you've paid off. So very, very important. If you want to access capital, be faithful in your payments. The other thing is you look at, they look at your capacity, they evaluate your business plan to see if it's a good idea, whether the idea is viable. If it's viable, then the bank will find it easier to sell to you. I mean, to give you the loan, sorry. So they will find it easier to lend you that money. So you have to make sure that you have a robust business plan that it's clear about when you break even. Your financial projections are actually realistic. They are not false. They are real. So that's very, very, very important. The other thing that they look at is they look at your capital. How much are you making? What does your cash flow statement look like? Because they want to have an idea. Because remember, this is debt financing. So so there's a principal, then there's interest. The principal you have to pay, then interest. So they want to calculate and see if they give you 1 year to pay off that loan, would you be able to pay it off based on your cash flows? So that's a calculation they do. Next thing is they have what we call collateral. Collateral is security. They say, okay, if you fail to pay, how else can we recover our money? So this security can either be what we refer to as, it can be real estate, yeah, that is property, or it can be intangible. So it can be tangible and intangible property. Tangible could be real estate, could be what we refer to as debentures. Debentures are the assets of the company are charged, like the cars, the furniture, the computers are used as security for the loan. And it could be intangible assets like intellectual property. Intellectual property can also be used as security. So the bank will assess whether you have assets. So both current assets and non-current assets. The next thing is the bank will set conditions. They have terms. Obviously, banks are highly regulated. So they are told how to lend. They're instructed by the Bank of Uganda, the central bank. But at the end of the day, you have to sign a loan agreement. They tell you the terms of payment, when to pay, what happens if you don't pay. If you don't pay, how will the bank go about recovering the money? So those are the things that the bank looks at. It makes sure that it gets the best terms and conditions for itself. Yeah, so when you're going to borrow from a bank, think through that. Then the other thing that you're going to look at is, we're going to look at, okay, so, someone has a question. Looks like someone has a question. So someone is asking, dear Moses, if I have that's Jesse. If I have no credit history, does it mean I have no credit score? Yeah, that's true. You have no credit score as yet, but there's a but to that. You see, now we have the National Payment Systems Act, and mobile money is recognized as a payment system. And more, especially in developed financial systems, like Uganda is still growing, the financial ecosystem is still growing. But in developed financial systems, you find things such as failure to pay your mobile money loans also is recorded to the Credit Reference Bureau. The inability to pay, for example, your car meter. If your car meter runs out, and you do not pay, or you let it run out, it could be an indication of your character, your inability to pay, or the fact that you're not good with paying back your loans. Such information is collected extensively in the first world. They use technologies such as IoT devices, that is Internet of Things devices, to gather sensors, to gather this information. So more and more, the world is getting complicated in that sense that a lot of information, even your Facebook behavior, blah, 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 can be used to determine whether you're a good borrower or not. But in Uganda, let me just be clear and say that if you've not borrowed, if you've not borrowed from any financial institution, then you don't have a credit score as yet. So that's the position. Yeah. And the other thing that we're looking at is, okay, so how do we do IPOs? I've talked about it, the initial public offerings, yeah? An IPO is when a company goes public. And my prayer is that for all of you that are listening today, my prayer is that your companies will go public, because that means, you know, they have really, really, really grown. You go public to allow the public to buy shares in your company, but also allows you to get money from the public. So imagine, so it's a form of crowd. So in a way, it's a form of crowd, funding, in the sense that if you go out to say 10 million people, and each of them is investing 100,000 in your company, then there you go. You already, you already have something like, $1 trillion or whatever. I don't know what the figure is, but around $1 trillion shillings in your account just from that offering. So it allows businesses to raise capital for expansion. Yeah. And also it's a good thing because it may also enhance the reputation of the company with the community and the public generally, in the sense that if they feel like they own the company, then a lot of them will be swayed to buying your products and services. That's also another good thing about an initial public offering. So how do you go about doing this? Like what MTN is doing right now. So these are the steps. So you could choose an underwriter or investment banker. What does the investment banker do? Basically, what happens is, as a business, you put together a document called a prospectus. So when you put together the prospectus shows, and that's that document MTN shared a few weeks ago, that huge document. The prospectus gives a background of the company, how it started, what it does, who are the shareholders, who are part of the management team, what is the value of the shares currently, financial projections and reports. All of those are attached. Now you get that document, you can present it to a bank called an investment bank, or an underwriter, it can be an insurance company. These type of companies, their business is to buy a public company shares at a discount. So they'll buy them at a discount. So for example, if MTN wants to issue an IPO at maybe, and it's hoping to sell the shares at 100,000, so it would maybe this investment bank will approach MTN and say, you know what, we'll buy those shares at 80,000 each from you, then we shall sell them on your behalf to the public at 100,000. So that means they'll make a profit of 20,000 on each share they buy. But the good thing for the company is that it gets all its money at once. So the investment banker will buy and remit money to the company, and then the company will And then the investment banker would then have the duty to sell those shares. If they fail to sell them, then they lose. But that's the business of investment banking and underwriting. So the next thing is you draw up a letter and then attach the prospectus, submit that prospectus to the Capital Markets Authority, because the Capital Markets Authority would want to see that you're telling the truth, that you're not lying. It would like to vet your directors, vet the people that run the company, to make sure that you do not defraud. It's a way to protect the public, that the public is not defrauded, that you do not collect their money and then fail to utilize it well, fail to pay dividends on the shares that, or to even issue shares and pay dividends against those shares. So yeah, so the Capital Markets Authority regulates that. And then, of course, once you've gone through those processes, the different filings, it's an elaborate process. It's not an easy process. It involves a lot of advisors, come on board to advise on the different processes. Once you're done with the Capital Markets Authority, then you can announce. You can go on TV. You can, like what MTN did, I think 3 weeks ago. Yeah, go on TV, announce. This is now where the cocktail parties start. Celebrate, and then encourage the public. Then you can now do road shows. You can now get on TV, get on radio, encourage people to buy the shares. You've seen MTN sending ads on YouTube. You're watching a YouTube video, you see MTN advertising. You're watching NBS or NTV, you see that appearing. So that's the process. That's how it works. And guys, I hope I've helped you today. I've tried to condense a lot of information into something simple. But you know what? At this juncture, I'll just let you ask questions. If there's something that I've missed that you'd like to learn, to know more about, yeah, please ask me a question. Feel free. I'm here at your service. Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Moses Ngorok. Once again, you can contact me on that email or send me a WhatsApp later in case you need to talk further. Thank you so much. God bless you all. I'm now ready to take questions, comments. Just, feel free to share your thoughts. Yeah. So do we have any questions, any comments?
Yes, Moses.
Yeah. Yes, I'm listening, sir.
I just wanted to, from your experience, and especially from the legal perspective, what have you seen work better? Equity and debt. Which one, especially for us, the younger ones that are trying to grow up, which one would you advise us to go through with in this kind of stages? Thank you.
Well,
we are done, but I want you to,
okay, so that's a good question. Thank you for that question. If you saw, the first thing that I did, talk about, when we started talking about funding, we talked about the need to evaluate your business. At what stage are you at? What is your product? What is your business model? What are your goals? What's your strategic plan? You look at all of that and then decide based on that. But like I mentioned, there are different types of investors. So we've talked broadly. We say there are equity investors, and then there's equity, then there's debt. Ordinarily, from experience, equity, especially private equity, that is through like angel investors, is the best type when you're starting out, rather than going to a bank. This is how it, this is why, this is the reason. So sorry, someone is. Okay, someone, we're gonna need you to like mute a bit. So the reason why it's not wise to borrow to grow your business is because one, you're not yet certain about the cash flow. You know, like are you certain about how much is coming in? Is it regular? Are you able to like predict? So you don't have predictable income. You understand, eh? So because at the end of the day, what you're going to use to pay back, or to either pay back in terms of say interest, or pay back in terms of you know, like dividends and the like, is going to come down to how much you're making as a business. So when you're starting out, you may not be making so much. And so if you want to borrow, you have to learn against your ability to pay back. And so, you know, like debt finance comes with a lot of conditions, and some of these conditions include interest. So you're not, whereas in equity financing comes just, you know, you get that amount in exchange for shares. So it's a bit safer in that sense, because if you fail to pay back your debt, the interest keeps growing and then you may end up being liquidated. Liquidation means that your business closes, it's shut down legally. So that's why a lot of people, financial experts, so this is actually a question to be answered by a financial expert, but the financial experts I've spoken to normally advise that you borrow, use debt financing to expand a business. That means you already have a recognizable customer base. You already have, you know, your income is predictable. So you know that each month for the last 2 years, I've been making 10 million. So if I borrow 100 million, it means it will take me 10 months to pay that off. So you can be sure, you know, I have this contract, I have this contract, I have so and so, everything is in order. Maybe save for what we call force majeure, like COVID-19, say for instances like COVID-19. So I think it really comes down to your needs, but most importantly, where you are as a business in terms of early stage growth. So very important to have all of that in mind, yeah? I hope I've answered you. Susan, I've put up the slide on venture capital. I hope you're reading it. Then Emmanuel is asking, what happens if I borrow from the venture capitalist, but you don't borrow from a venture capitalist. You get money from a venture capitalist in exchange for shares. So, but my business fails to make money. If the business fails to make, so anyway, Emmanuel, let's correct the word. Let's not use the word borrow. I get your question. It's a very good question, but let's not use the word borrow. Let's say you get an investment from a venture capitalist. If you get that and it fails, then of course the venture capitalist loses. That's why tomorrow, as you know, we're going to talk about due diligence. We're going to talk about what these funders look at before they give you money. They make sure as much as possible that the likelihood of you failing is minimized. So they do a risk assessment, and they do that through due diligence. They look at who the directors are. Do we know them? Are they qualified? Those are the things we're going to talk about tomorrow. Yeah, in tomorrow's discussion, we're going to look at due diligence. But generally, Emmanuel, if it fails, they're at a loss. You understand? They invested in the wrong venture, unfortunately. Yeah. Unless it's a type of, because there are also types of financing. If you noted at the beginning, I talked about mixed. There is what we call a hybrid of mixed equity, mixed debt financing. So you have things like convertible notes. You have mezzanine, what they call mezzanine, mezzanine capital or funding. So to be honest, I've tried to stay away from those complex terms so that we can understand the basics which are good enough to help us navigate, getting funding this month. Yeah. So let me Susan, let me just put in the next slide for you. You'll get this. This will be shared with you nonetheless, but this is what it looks like. And then someone is asking a question. Jesse, you're asking, hello, Moses, if on exit I want to buy my shares back, is it possible? Yes. So what happens is there's a document called a shareholders agreement. So when you get investors on board, you have to, it's important to go to your lawyer and make sure that your lawyer drafts a document called a shareholders agreement. This document will set out the terms of the shareholding. And one of the key terms to put would be to put a term called the priority of purchase. You understand, eh? The priority of purchase, meaning that as the owner of the business, you seek priority in in case this person is exiting, that they should make an offer to you first before they make an offer of the shares to any other party. So that's what it's called. It's called the priority of purchase. So it's a condition you put in the contract. But I think also to speak generally, I hope I've answered you, Jesse. You must note that these investors, when they come on board, they are strict. There are lots of documents they would want you to sign. Those are the documents we'll be looking at tomorrow. So yeah, they would like you to sign the shareholders agreement. They would like you, and in there they will have their types of shares in a company. They're what they call preferential shares. There is what they call common stock. So preferential shares are shares that they give these investors rights to dividends, fast rights to dividends, in case the company is shut down. Also, to answer your question, Emmanuel, a little more, that in case the company, I want to use the word shut down, but the technical term is liquidated. If the company is liquidated, these people will enjoy rights, that include, the property of the company will have to be sold. So they'll try as much as possible to recover their investment. So early on, I'd said, Emmanuel, that they would lose, but they would try as much as possible to liquidate the assets of the company and get money from that. So some of the terms that they're going to put in the shareholders agreements and the like are terms that protect their interests. So they say we shall be the first to receive money in case the assets of the company are sold. So those are some of the things that these investors would ensure that are in the contract that you sign when they're coming on board. Susan is asking, thanks so much. You're welcome, Susan. She wanted to understand those two clearly and see where I may fall. Looks like both are quite demanding. So I think you're talking about venture capitalists and private investors. Susan, there are so many options. When we talk about private investors, there are different types of private investors. There are what they call angel investors. There's of course, we've talked about venture capital. There's also other types of private equity, and all these people have different needs and conditions. You find that angel investors are generally not so, they may not be as demanding, understanding of your stage of growth. So it's important to talk to those people that understand your industry, that understand the type of business you have in terms of size and the industry. So private investors come in different shapes and sizes and with different conditions and terms. So it's important to identify, so let's not write them off and say, hey, all of them are two traders. No, you just look and say, and even, you know what, even your own families are private investors. So you can go to them, so that's important. So I hope, Susan, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right, people. Now I'll be happy to take more questions in case you have. If not, we can end today's session here, if that's okay with you. Yeah. All right. Are there no more questions? All right, all righty. Thank you so much. So everyone do have a lovely day. Tomorrow we'll be looking at tomorrow's topic. I'm just getting the actual, looking at due diligence. Yeah. Someone is asking a question. Oh, you're welcome, Rona. So tomorrow we're going to look at term sheets and due diligence. So that's what we're going to be looking at tomorrow. I look forward to spending time with you. Thank you. Do have a lovely day. Oh, yes, Susan, you have a question?
No, no question.
Okay. You're welcome, Diana. All right.